Welcome back. In this, we're going to have a look at undue influence, which is again part of the assignment. So let's start first with looking at the assignment itself. Now, this is a fact situation where you're applying the ILAC approach to solving business issues in law. ILAC stands for issue, identify the legal issue, then state the law, the L, then apply the facts to the law and reach a conclusion. So this is part of the law relating to consent, and in the law of consent we ask the question whether a person has willingly entered a contract. That means understanding what you're actually entering. You can't consent to something you don't understand. Now, what we tend to do in law is not say who has consented to a contract, but who cannot consent to a contract. And there are 5 areas: duress, which is pressure; unconscionability, taking advantage of a person; the one we're looking at now, misrep, we've looked at mistake. Now these all have very specific requirements behind them, so they're not simply asking the question, are you threatened or is it an unfair contract? You have to follow the steps. And in this case, we're using undue influence. Now, to be very clear on this, if you enter a contract, particularly if you sign it, then the law is not sympathetic to a person who wants to get out of that contract saying, I didn't understand it. It is difficult to do this, and there have to be very strong grounds for it. And one of those is undue influence, which we'll now work through. So the form of undue influence we're looking at right now is a relationship of confidence and trust which has been abused, and an unfair contract has resulted, and then the law will presume the person has abused that relationship and the contract will be voidable. That can be rebutted, the presumption, if it's shown the person did consent or they had sufficient independent advice to protect them. Now on Canvas we've got a diagram here which just follows through the steps, so you should approach this assignment by simply following through these steps. Now the first one is there a relationship of dominance and trust? Now in this particular example we have 2 options. Have we a special relationship? Now these are relationships where you don't have to prove there is the confidence and trust, it is simply assumed by law. So parent and child, solicitor client, trustee, beneficiary, religious advisor. There are some more, however these are situations where we can simply say there is a very high degree of influence and trust and it's always present. So these people owe duties to the weaker party. They are often fiduciaries, which is those examples. In every other situation, you've got to prove that a relationship exists or has developed where one person follows the other without question. And that evidence may show it develops over time. The longer, the more likely to develop. It generally involves some weakness of one party, and we can establish that this person will not question the advice of the other, and therefore the law imposes this duty on them. The second step here is to simply say, is this contract manifestly unfair? Now this word manifestly just means apparently obvious. To use a colloquialism, it slaps you in the face with a wet fish. It's so obvious that it's an unfair contract. So not just minorly unfair, it has to be manifestly unfair. If we can get through that hurdle, the court then presumes we have undue influence and the contract is, as stated here, voidable at the option of the party influenced. So that would be Aldo in your example if you find undue influence. After that, you're simply asking the question, can this assumption be rebutted? Did he have independent advice, or was he in fact quite competent mentally and capabilities wise to understand what he was entering? So follow through the process for the assignment, follow through those steps and simply come to your conclusion. And therefore, you can also conclude what are the implications for your business if you took this money and then the court declared the contract to be voidable. Okay, so we've finished there with undue influence, and here's a picture of some big waterfalls from Victoria Falls in Zimbabwe.